Hello there, Church History 2, Lecture 12. Let's start here with the Baptists in America, Part 1. Most of the students, not all of them, but most are from America. So if you're not from America, well, it's still good to know this. It's from John T. Christian's book, A History of Baptists, 1922. The first Baptists on this continent were found in New England. That portion of the country was settled by the Separatists and the Puritans. The first named of these parties established Plymouth Colony. So that would be the Separatists, and were known as the Pilgrim Fathers. So Pilgrims were not Puritans. The Puritans at a later date occupied Massachusetts Bay. So you'll know and you'll see that there's differences between the Separatist Pilgrims and these Puritans. Puritans are more Protestant. Pilgrims are more, in my understanding, Baptists. One point must be kept clearly in mind. In what is now called Massachusetts, there were in the early days two colonies, two centers of life and influence, very distinct one from the other. There was a little colony of Plymouth beginning in 1620, and a larger colony of Massachusetts Bay beginning in 1628, which centered around Salem, Boston, and Charleston. These colonies were about 40 miles apart, these two. Wilderness separated them by the land route so that the principal intercourse was by water. You say, what's all this about? You'll see. But they were not so far separated by distance and physical difficulties as their general ideas and ways of looking at the great questions which were then up for consideration. So I think it's the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They're almost sounds like the same group, but they're not. They're separated by 40 miles. The people at Plymouth were called Pilgrims. Remember? And then the people at the Bay of Massachusetts were called Puritans. The people at Plymouth were called Separatists, and those at the Bay were Nonconformists. And these words conveyed entirely separate ideas, as we'll get into this now. Don't let this confuse you. Just listen now. Just know that there's a difference between the Pilgrims and the Puritans. My understanding, before we go read through this, is the Puritans were rebels to the Church of England. They wanted to live more pure lives, sure, but they were Protestants. They weren't Baptists at all. And the Pilgrims were, I think, mostly Baptist. Most of the Separatists were north of England men, so are Pilgrims. They denounced the Church of England as corrupt, and they wholly separated from its communion. So total separatists from what? The Church of England. Separatists from what? The Church of England. When the heavy hand of persecution fell on them, they migrated to Holland. The surroundings in the Netherlands were not favorable to them, so we read about this in Lecture 11, I think. The language was harsh, the climate undesirable, and their environments were not satisfactory in many directions. So they crossed the seas and established themselves at Plymouth as the forerunners of an innumerable host. What? They came from England? First to Holland, not too far away. You think of that as far away. It's not too far away, but then they went to America. The Puritans, on the other hand, did not break with the Church of England. They descended from many of its tenets, but did not separate from it, so much like the Reformers in the Church, in the Catholic Church. They thought that the Church ought to be reformed and remodeled. When the Puritans met with no success in this direction, they likewise sought a home in the New World. Reverend Francis Higginson, on leaving England in 1629, is reported to have said, "We will not say, as the Separatists were wont to say at their leaving of England, 'Farewell, Babylon, farewell, Rome.'" So that's what the Pilgrims said. But we will say, "Farewell, dear England, and all the Christian friends there. We do not go to New England as separatists from the Church of England, though we cannot but separate from the corruptions of it. But we go to practice a positive part of church reformation and propagate the gospel in America. You compromisers!" So the Pilgrims, I guess, might have said, "Farewell, Babylon, great whore of Revelation." Okay. That was from Cotton Mather. Cotton Mather further, now this Cotton Mather, why would you wear your hair that way? Well, that's not his real hair. Just kind of put your fingers over it and try to get rid of that hair, and you see a normal looking man. With it on there, it's a freak. Especially, I would not, if I had that much hair wig thing on me, I would not part it up top. I would have it down over the forehead some. You look like a goon. Cotton Mather states that many of the first settlers of Massachusetts were Baptists, and that they were as holy and faithful and heavenly people as any, perhaps, in the world. As our brethren in the mother country, says Benedict, had been much intermixed with the dissenting Pedo-Baptists, it is highly probable that the early immigrants of this class in the infant colony continued to do so for the first years of their settlement there. I almost understand what he says. And while they continued in this state of quiescence or concealment, they met with no trouble or opposition. Almost sounds like he says that this first group, the infant group, continued to do so. So they had intermixed with the Pedo-Baptists, so there was this mixture there of Church of England and Baptists. So the Pilgrims were not all Baptists, it was intermixed. I think that's what he was saying there, or what we can take from it. I think. Well, you're supposed to be the teacher, don't you know? No, I don't. Persecutions had begun against the Baptists in 1635 and were inflicted subsequently in the name of the law in many places in Dorchester, Weymouth, Rehoboth, Salem, Watertown, Hingham, Dover, College Station, Austin, Houston, and Swampscott. So numerous were the offenders that on November 13, 1644, the General Court passed a law for the suppression of the Baptists. The law was as follows. This is in America, Massachusetts, I think it was. For as much as experience hath plentifully and often proved that since the first rising of the Anabaptists about 100 years since, they have been the incendiaries of the commonwealths and the infectors of persons in main matters of religion, and the troublers of churches in all places where they have been. Which opinions, if they should be connived at, which opinions, if they should be connived at by us, are like to be increased among us, and so must necessarily bring guilt upon us, infection and trouble to the churches, and hazard to the whole commonwealth. It is ordered and agreed that if any person or persons within this jurisdiction shall either openly condemn or oppose the baptizing of infants, every such person or persons shall be sentenced to banishment. Where's this at? New England, America. Banish them, and that means they're probably going to die. Last section here, a little bit. David Benedict's book, the following table taken from Morse's Geography exhibits in one view the settlements of the different states and the names of those by which they are affected. So Quebec, the French came on and started that. Virginia, by Lord de la Warr, what a name. Newfoundland, founded by Governor John Guy. New York, New Jersey, by the Dutch. Plymouth, by part of Mr. Robinson's congregation. The list goes on. Interesting. By this table, it appears that a permanent settlement was effected in Virginia 10 years, look at that, 10 years before the fathers of New England landed at Plymouth. So 10 years before, let me go back to see, hold on a second. I'm checking the dates. I thought it was 1620. Plymouth began. There was a little colony of Plymouth beginning. Okay. Well, they were there before the Puritans came. I think that's what he's referring to here. Alright. Some temporary settlements had been made in the country about 20 years before. Most of the first settlers of America were merely worldly adventurers who were induced to encounter the dangers of a distant voyage and the hardships of a wilderness from the prospects of a temporal event, whatever. Those who came from England, which was by far the greatest number, for the most part Episcopalians. There were, however, intermixed in almost all the different companies of immigrants, dissenters of different names, and among them we have reason to believe there were of the Baptists a few. Now my understanding is the Pilgrims, when they came over around 1620, was a lot of Baptists. The Puritans and these other, they had many ships coming over, were mostly dissenters and some Baptists in there. That's my understanding. It does not appear that there were in any of the colonies any religious establishments which acquired much permanency or that carried their acts of intolerance to any considerable degree, except in Virginia, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. The Episcopal Church was the established religion of the Carolinas, but it had neither the spirit nor power of persecuting dissenters to any great extent. Maryland, sounds like Queen Mary, or the Mary of the Bible, of the Catholic Church, excuse me. Man, my brain is shutting down. Maryland was founded by Roman Catholics, but they, different from their brethren in the old world, were always tolerant and mild, because it's Maryland. Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers, who, like the Baptists in Rhode Island, would never establish any religious laws. And of course, there could be no religious persecution. So Rhode Island was a safe haven for all religions. New York and New Jersey were settled by a mixture of people of many nations' religions, but it's probable the majority of the settlers were Episcopalians. So let me back up from that information. It sounds like not the majority of folks coming in 1622 or 1620 were Baptists. You look on the first big paragraph there. There's a little colony of Plymouth beginning in 1620. Some of those were Baptists, this colony. Remember, they're coming over, not like the Baptists rented a ship and said, let's go over to this other place. The ship was sailing, they paid their money, and someone on this. Maybe, I don't know, 200, 400 people could fit on it. I don't know if that's the size ship there. They came over and settled and wanted to start, be able to propagate their belief freely. And the Lord brought them over there. We'll read more about that in a little bit. Thanks a lot.